Hey, 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 Nikki Brown here, no matter where you are and what part of the world you're in. I hope that you're having a good day. So, along this journey, that is healing journey that I've been on, I either write down or make a mental note of the things that trigger me. And sometimes the answer as to why comes to me right away, and sometimes it takes a while. So, I'm in a situation now where I'm not given all the tools and knowledge that I need to successfully perform. But if something goes wrong, I'm blamed for it. Um, and I'm just talking about myself. I'm not talking about anyone else who may also be in the same situation, right? And it's very disturbing. It's a very uncomfortable feeling. And again, it can be very triggering. And triggers, of course, solicit feelings of anger, sadness, even possibly depression. And then those mental thoughts can become pains in the body, right? So I was just in the kitchen and I realized why um, this current situation is triggering. When I was about 5 years old in kindergarten, I realized my mom was leaving me in the house by myself, right? And I may have told this story before. And the first time it happened, I woke up in a panic. I was so worried, like, oh my God, my mom is laying somewhere in the gutter. Because I'm thinking of the TV show Good Times, and they always talked about somebody being in the gutter, right? Laying in the gutter. And so this is why I got these thoughts from this terminology. And I just started thinking about it as I was making my smoothie. It's delicious, by the way. It's pineapple, chia seeds, ginger, coconut yogurt by Jojo Coco June. Coconut yogurt, plant based, water, and a banana. Very, very good, especially if you have sciatica. So, this is a great drink for those who have sciatic nerve pain. You're welcome. Oh, and I put some peaches in there too, just for as a little extra flavor. Anyway, the first time it happened, I called my grandmother, and she lived about 20, 30 minutes away at the time. So she, of course, in a panic too, rushed over because we don't know where my mom is. And maybe 10, 15 minutes later, my mom comes in. We heard her walking up the stairs. She comes in, she turns the key in the door, and she starts snapping, right? Why the fuck aren't you dressed? What the fuck are you doing here? She says to my grandmother. And blah, 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 on and on and on. And it made me think about that because I keep my ringer off, right? I've done this for years and I'm fine with it. And someone tried to call me and it was like, well, what about your people? Like, what if somebody needs you? And I was like, they don't need me. And the reason I say that is because we cannot compare relationships, right? I cannot compare my relationship with my mom to your relationship with your mom or your dad or anyone else in your family, anyone else you are friends with. Sometimes there's no comparison, and a lot of times people will try to make people feel guilty or ashamed, but you don't know someone else's situation or circumstances, right? You don't know what their relationship is like with someone else. So you can't just assume based on how you have lived that people should make themselves available for someone that they have no interest in making themselves available to. I had a life coach, and they do encourage you to mend the relationships with your relatives, right? However, there is a disclaimer. She also said, unless they are too toxic. And if you are on a healing journey, and you continue to surround yourself by toxic people, you it's harder for you to heal, right? It's like going into a lion's den, right? Each time you put yourself into a lion's den, you are putting your life at risk, whether it be your spiritual life, your mental life, your emotional life, um, even your just your physical well-being. You know, a lot of times there's verbal abuse, right? Mental, emotional, financial, even abuse that we experience from other people. And some people are able to laugh it off. But when you've been traumatized your whole entire life, and then you get to a place of realization and you accept those circumstances and you go on a healing journey, you know that these people are 9 times out of 10 not going to change. And so, again, to put yourself in harm's way is to literally put yourself in the lion's den each and every time you talk to this person, because you never know what you're going to get, right? Doesn't mean that you don't love them, but sometimes you have to love certain people from a distance. I am not the only person who feels that way, right? There are lots of people. Dr. Romney is one of them. She has distanced herself and gone no contact from her relatives as well. She is now an expert on narcissism because she came to realize that her family is narcissistic. And I'm going to say that majority of the people in my family have most of the narcissistic traits or tendencies. And so when you are raised by a narcissist, life is very different for you. And it affects every area of your life. And so again, if you don't follow in those same footsteps and you decide to go along a different path, which of course makes the narcissist angry, you have to be able to build yourself up mentally in order to deal with someone who is not well. And they don't consider themselves unhealthy, right? I grew up in a household with my mother and my grandmother calling one another bitches, right? Calling each other names. My grandmother calling my mother a fucking junkie, right? And them fist fighting. How many of you have experienced that? Where your mother and your grandmother were fist fighting in front of you? I'm going to go ahead and say that most of you have not. There may be a handful of you who have, but I'm going to say that a large majority of you cannot relate to what I'm saying at all whatsoever. Right? And so, again, you cannot tell someone to place themselves in harm's way or to subject themselves to an unhealthy or a toxic environment just because you did it. If that's what you choose to do, by all means, do what you think is best. But there are some people who can't handle that, right? And if you are someone who cannot handle that, or you are on a spiritual or a healing journey, and you feel that you're not ready because you know that you are going to be triggered, I am going to recommend that you continue to keep your distance and or go no contact. There are people who go to see their family around holidays every 3 years, every 5 years, because they already know what the outcome is going to be. Because again, these people aren't trying to seek any type of counseling, therapy, or life coaching. They're not going to change. They're going to leave here the same way that they've always been. And 9 times out of 10, something traumatic happened to them, and this is why they've become the way that they have. They have not learned to heal. They've not learned to forgive. And a lot of times people think, oh, well, you should just go back around your family. And if you don't go back around your family, that means You don't forgive them. That doesn't mean that. You forgive people for you, your own peace of mind, your own health and well being. But just because you forgive someone does not mean, again, that you have to continue to deal with the toxic behavior that they exhibit. And we need to stop judging people. I accept people for who they are, the way that they are. If somebody tells me something, you know, they do or don't talk to someone, I accept them for who they are, the way that they are. And I can come from a place of understanding. And I know it may be hard for you to put yourself in someone's shoes because you may, again, this may be something that you've never experienced. Maybe you know someone who has, maybe you don't. But even if you know someone who has, you still can't fully understand because you've never experienced it, right? There's just certain things that you can't fully relate to because you've never experienced it. Like, if I'm going to leave that one alone because times have changed. But anyway, there's just certain things you may never understand, and you don't have to understand, but you can have compassion, you can have empathy, and you can stop being judgmental and telling people what they should or should not do based on what you would or would not do, because their life is their own and your life is your own. We've all had different experiences, and it is okay for people to sit in the space that they are in. You don't have to understand. You don't have to understand. It's okay if you don't understand. It's not meant for you to understand because everybody's story is different. It's okay if you can't relate. Everybody's story is different. We're all meant to live a different life. That's why we had different lives. And Oprah became who she is based on her story, right? A lot of people didn't have that story of getting pregnant at what, 13, 14? Some people weren't even thinking of having sex, especially at that day and time. A lot of people still have their innocence, right? And a lot of people become famous because of their story. Think about all the celebrities who've been homeless, some multiple times, like Steve Harvey, right? But that was part of his journey, that was part of his experience. And so when some people see, again, the toxic behavior that surrounds them, it is triggering. And I know for myself personally, it just makes me want to distance myself from that person or from those people. I don't want to argue. I don't want to fight. I don't want to yell. I may express how I feel. I may say what I'm thinking. I may not. I may just play my exit strategy because I just don't want to be around it. Because again, it may not have anything to do with those people in hindsight, right? But at the same time, those people may be still exhibiting those same traits or behaviors. How do you expect someone to know something or learn something if they were never told, if they were never taught? And then you penalize or punish them because they didn't know. It doesn't make sense. And for someone who didn't experience what I experienced growing up, they may not see anything wrong with it. They may not realize that this is not necessarily the best way to handle this situation. They just accept what is. And that's fine because, again, we're all different. And I always say we're different so that we can learn from one another, not so that we can judge or criticize one another. But I just wanted to share that because, again, I just realized that's one of the reasons why that situation is triggering, right? No harm. You know what I'm saying? I'm not mad at anybody. I accept people for who they are, the way that they are, right? And people can do whatever they choose to do, and so can I, right? So I'm thankful that I had that realization. Someone asked me what I was thankful for yesterday, and I said knowledge. And this is a perfect example of that. So I was able to think through those thoughts. And although it was emotionally triggering, again, I'm glad I'm now at the place where I realize what's going on so I can handle the situation a little differently, right? Going forward. So I hope that this was helpful to someone because I'm sure that there's someone who may be able to relate to my story or who can at least relate to the feelings of being in a situation like that, right? It doesn't have to be the same story, doesn't have to be the same situation or circumstance, but the feeling. That's what it is. It's all about the feeling. We feel certain things that may or may not trigger us, or it just feels uncomfortable or uneasy, right? Or it makes life more challenging. And we may not be able to put words to it. We may not know what's going on. We may not understand what's going on, but we just know it doesn't feel good, right? So I'm glad I was able to share that. And as always, I love y'all. Mwah.